Today's episode, I'm joined by Avery Wasmansky, a licensed trauma-informed therapist who specializes in working with women and moms navigating chronic overwhelm, self-doubt, and parenting and relationship challenges. Avery supports clients experiencing symptoms of ADHD, anxiety, and trauma, incorporating mindfulness and somatic techniques with a focus on therapeutic relationship as a foundation for healing and change. We are diving into what ADHD really is, how it uniquely presents in midlife, and practical steps you can take starting today to better understand and support yourself. Before we begin, please note that the information shared in this episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace professional medical or mental health advice. If you're experiencing symptoms that concern you, please consult a qualified health care provider. Now let's get into the conversation. Welcome to Miles from Review, the podcast powered by KatFit Strength, where busy women like you find practical solutions to fuel your fitness journey with authenticity and resilience. I'm Kat, your host, a mom of 2 active boys, a business owner, and an ultramarathon runner, and a strength trainer in her 40s. With nearly 2 decades of experience, I'm here to help you cut through the noise of fads, hacks, and quick fixes. This is a space where we celebrate womanhood and motherhood, all while building strength and resilience and reconnecting with you from a place of self-compassion and worthiness. Whether you're lacing up your running shoes to go out for a run, driving your kids to practice, or squeezing in a moment for yourself, I'm right here in the trenches with you. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Miles from Review. I am joined with Avery again. She was on the podcast about a year ago, and we are going to be diving into the topic of ADHD in midlife women. Welcome to the show, Avery.
Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. So I am super curious about this topic. This is something that we're hearing about it more and more. And I think for all good reasons, and especially this correlation where it is not solely being tied to midlife, but there's this emergence of ADHD around midlife. So looking at midlife over 35 plus or 40 plus in that perimenopause area.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start off with defining ADHD.
Sure. So, of course, this is, trying to summarize a little bit, but ADHD, one, is not always looking the same in everyone. It can kind of present in a variety of ways, but typically we have some combination of challenges with attention and focus. And then we have challenges related to hyperactivity, impulsivity, or we have a combination of kind of all of those things happening at the same time. And so this can look like having trouble focusing on a task or completing tasks to completion, getting easily distracted, always being on the move and never slowing down either physically or in our brain. And so kind of always having that busy brain is something that a lot of people tend to experience. And it can really generally impact our executive functions, which is like all of the things that we need in order to plan, prioritize tasks, manage our time, organize activities and our space around us. And so those are kind of the main things that we see, along with, of course, emotional regulation, which is not technically a criteria, but is something we see in most people who have ADHD.
I like how you put that. It's a multitude and it looks different for every person, because I do find that sometimes we want a very clean black and white where it is different for each person. And last time we talked a bit about the pressure and perfectionism, especially in the role of motherhood and how that shows up. Can you speak a little bit to recap what we talked about? I will put that in the show notes, how that relates to ADHD in the context of motherhood, of that perfectionism, pressure, and ADHD. I know that's a big topic.
It's okay. So I guess in summary, kind of what we sometimes see is when we have this expectation, maybe from society, or maybe we've learned this through our past relationships, or we've seen what social media tells us in terms of what makes a good parent, we have this experience of wanting to, of course, kind of fit into that mold. And when we have a brain that functions maybe a little bit differently than someone else who maybe we struggle with organizing all of the appointments and school activities and extracurriculars with our kids or our own home, there's a lot of shame that we experience. And so when that happens, and then when we also are struggling at times to regulate our emotions, and we might have these experiences with our children where we become angry or have really big, maybe explosive feelings, because that happens sometimes, a lot of shame comes up there too. And so when all of that's happening around us, but we have these experiences or kind of these models for how a good, quote unquote, good mother or good parent should be responding or acting, that shame kind of leads us to this experience where we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We feel terrible for maybe acting in a way that we feel is not the correct way to act, or maybe society tells us is not correct. And so it can cause a lot of anxiety and therefore can lead to this sense that like we need to do better and we need to do it perfectly, or we need to, we're never good enough. Right.
Right.
And so perfectionism doesn't necessarily mean that we are perfect all the time. It's this idea that we're striving to be better than we are now because we're not doing it good enough. And then we just feel terrible about ourselves.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And there's, as we know, social media is so great at putting up these like perfect little models in this perfect little container, which is
right.
not true. And
We're going to use these perfect scripts when our kids lose their minds, and that we're going to keep our cool. And that's just not always the case.
exactly, exactly. And it's, yeah, we're human too.
Mm-hmm.
So with ADHD, I hear from some of my clients who have been diagnosed with it, where, especially in the context of working out, and I battle this too with individuals who are not, who do not have the diagnosis of ADHD, is this whole idea of that trap thinking like it's just a lack of discipline and a lack of willpower. When from my standpoint, it's like, no, willpower is great and helps, but discipline is good. But sometimes it's just the brain. So if you could speak to that trap of thinking of like, oh, if I was just more disciplined or if I had more willpower, etc.
Right. Yeah. So I think when we have a good understanding of how our brain actually functions, if we know that what's happening for us is that our brain is an ADHD brain and we have these experiences that make certain things difficult, like going back to that term executive functioning, if we know that, planning, prioritizing, organizing, managing time are all really difficult, which can impact every area of our lives, right? Whether it's feeding ourselves or our kids or our partner, or whether it is finding time to exercise, whether it is keeping your home organized or having clean laundry that allow you to maybe go exercise. Like there's so many factors that make an impact there. And so if we know how our brain functions, we can speak a little bit more compassionately to ourselves when we can identify that it's not a lack of discipline or willpower. It's that there are these barriers that are presenting, that are inhibiting me from getting to that point. And so if we can identify what the barriers are, we can also work towards breaking them down and making it a little bit more accessible. I know this comes up, in my sessions too, when people want to exercise more and they want to eat healthier, or we have to identify like, what are the barriers? Is it like that we don't actually have clothes that fit us, then we can't go exercise? Or is it too difficult to access like going to the gym? And so how can we make it easier for ourselves rather than shaming ourselves when we don't make it to the gym 5 days a week?
There's a few things I want to point out that you said there. One of the things is like knowing your brain and how it
Mhm.
functions. I think that is just so, so vital. I find myself talking to my 14-year-old about how to overcome his brain. We kind of have to create our own, I'm going to say cheat codes, because there's always going to be this resistance. And if we get better at knowing the resistance is going to be there, then we can overcome it. I know this is a little bit different than someone with the executive functioning with ADHD, because that is a different type of barrier. But also that idea of be compassionate with yourself, speak compassionately to yourself is so huge. And the idea of setting yourself up for success is so vital in so many ways. And I see it when I'm working with my clients, when I bring that notion to that point of like, how do we set ourselves up for success so it's easy? Easy doesn't mean that it takes the growth out of it. It, to your point, removes those barriers. And we as women who are doing it all and shifting their titles throughout the day to serve each title. And then when it comes to us, we are so decision fatigued that it's like, yeah, we don't want to have to think about where are my workout clothes? Where is my workout equipment? Taking the 3 steps to wherever your workout stuff may be, or if it's more than 3 steps, it's
Mm.
like that is cumbersome. So, how can we give back to ourselves when we are outward giving all day? So, I love that. I love that you incorporate that in with clients that
Yeah.
it's remove the barriers, make it easier for yourself.
Yeah.
We're going to kind of dip into perimenopause here, that whole it's having its time in the limelight, which is really, really great. And I
Mhm.
love it. And then with that, it comes some stuff that is a little bit predatory,
Yeah.
but there are hormonal shifts and chronic stress and how they overlap with attention and focus for individuals that may not have known that they have ADHD. And I'm going to say struggled. It's a struggle. If you don't know you have this way of the way the brain functions,
Mhm.
you're going to struggle a lot more. And so, how do you see that shift in that time period or in that period?
Sure. Well, so maybe before we talk about
Mhm.
perimenopause specifically, I think acknowledging that hormones play a big part in ADHD symptoms, just generally.
Mhm.
So it is really common to have the experience of maybe coming to the idea that we have a diagnosis of ADHD during big hormonal shift points in our lifetime. So when we have these major points of hormonal shifts throughout our lifetime, like when we're experiencing puberty or when we are, pregnant or postpartum, or when we're going through perimenopause or menopause, we have these major shifts. And so it's a really common time where someone might actually come to get a diagnosis because their symptoms have shifted to a degree, and it's kind of amplifying some of the experiences or symptoms that we're having. And so so significant about getting into the perimenopause time frame is that there's such a drastic drop in our hormones during that time that it greatly impacts our symptoms, because symptoms are affected by our estrogen production along with some other hormones that we have. When we have, this significant drop, like I believe from when perimenopause starts till when menopause is officially what you're experiencing, there's like a 65% drop in estrogen and progesterone. When we have that shift, it greatly impacts our focus and attention. It impacts our moodiness. We might feel more tired. We might also not be sleeping that great. We might have some increased memory symptoms, memory issues, and some other physical symptoms, of course, hot flashes and all of that stuff. And so when we have that huge shift that's happening also very inconsistently, because it might not be this like lovely consistent cycle, it might be very randomly that we have these major shifts in our hormones, it can really have a serious impact on our ability to function day to day.
Perimenopause, it can expand up to a decade,
Mhm.
and you're going to be on this roller coaster. It's not all doom and gloom, but
Right.
I really feel in this time, it's be curious about what's going on. Know that you are the authority in your body and find practitioners, therapists, coaches that allow you to continue having that authority and can support you through that process, which
Yeah.
can be tough to find, but it is because to your point, there is a lot of fluctuation before you get to postmenopausal. And again, postmenopausal isn't doom and gloom, but if we can sort out what's going on in perimenopause, I don't want to be like super generalized here, but feel better postmenopause. So, and oftentimes, in your 40s typically is when perimenopause rears its head. Your kids are coming of age. They're going through their own shifts at that time.
Mhm.
There are some women who have young babies during that time. So that's another hormonal shift at that point. So between that like 36 to 43 time period, you can still have children at that time, or even in your mid
Absolutely.
40s, you can still have children.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot, and I'm glad you backed it up of like, yep, the hormonal shifts there, that's when you see some of these symptoms become amplified.
Yeah.
Because it can feel that lost locus of control can feel
Yeah.
really scary in your own body, in your mind as to like what's going on. I know
Absolutely.
I find I'm like, I forget what I'm saying, or I'll switch in words and my kids are like, Mom, you did it again. I'm like, you know what, guys, I understand. Like you knew what I was saying.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
bear with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Go
it's
ahead.
so hard because some of the kind of like typical symptoms that we might see with perimenopause are also similar to things that we see with ADHD. And
Right.
so when we have like the forgetfulness and brain fog, like that stuff can happen with ADHD, but it might be really amplified in perimenopause. And so it's this question of like, is it ADHD or is it perimenopause? And so that comes up a lot, or we might just be told that that's normal, right? That's normal perimenopausal symptoms, whereas actually it's not really normal, especially if we don't
Yeah.
have a provider who really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up because I was going to kind of segue into there is like, how do you distinguish between because the symptoms overlap, and that's the tricky part is when symptoms overlap. I don't want to say it can lead to a misdiagnosis, but if you have had this throughout your whole life, and because as we know now, ADHD presents differently in girls through women than it does from boys through men. So women who are now 35 plus, or even I have clients who are 55 plus, and they're like, I was just diagnosed with ADHD and now my whole life makes sense. I feel like I have gotten a whole new lease on life. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like
Mhm.
that you now feel like you're in control, which it sucks. It took that long.
Yeah.
Is there key points? And this may be very, very gray area here, but are there key points to kind of articulate a direct diagnosis or perimenopausal symptoms? Are you curious about KatFit Strength? Well, KatFit Strength is designed to help you achieve your fitness goals with confidence and clarity. Whether you're a busy mom juggling multiple responsibilities, a woman navigating unique challenges of prenatal, postpartum, or perimenopause, or an athlete looking to enhance your performance, KatFit Strength has you covered. Let's get down to it. KatFit Strength offers personalized programs tailored to your unique needs, goals, and ensuring you get the most out of every workout. Expert guidance provided for you with the understanding of the importance of balancing strength training, cardio, and mobility. Flexible workouts designed to fit into your busy schedule, whether you're at home or at the gym or on the go. So why choose KatFit Strength? I believe in creating sustainable fitness habits that adapt to your lifestyle. I focus on helping you lift effectively, move better, and feel stronger every day. Plus, emphasis is on realistic goal setting, celebrating every win, and helping you stay motivated and inspired.
Well, I think when symptoms are so intense that they're impacting our, quality life on a consistent basis, and the symptoms are similar to ADHD, what we want to look at is, have these symptoms been present throughout the lifetime? So just because they're more significant in perimenopause does not mean that they weren't always there, because what we know is ADHD is not something that just develops. It's not something that just springs up out of nowhere. It doesn't, perimenopause or hormonal shifts don't cause ADHD, but what we know is that symptoms get more intensified. And so if we can look at symptoms across the lifespan and have some understanding of, were these things present in some degree, like when you were a child, when you were an adolescent and teenager, were these things actually happening? Or is it truly just perimenopause has kind of led to some of these things occurring? And most of the time, you're going to see, oh, right, we actually had these systems in place that we developed throughout our lifetime and were working up until my hormones got completely thrown out of whack. And that's why I'm kind of floundering or feeling like I'm drowning right now. And so the symptoms were always there, but we might have had these things in place that we even unconsciously have kind of developed, or maybe our parents helped us develop as kids. And so we learn these strategies to kind of deal with challenges with forgetting things, or with struggles with executive function, or with all of the kind of symptoms that we talk about. And it seemed kind of normal to just navigate life this way. But when things become so intensified with the hormonal shifts, it becomes this kind of like out of control sensation, or like there's something really wrong here because we don't have the understanding of how our brain might work.
It's the way the brain works. It's not, you're not at fault. It's not trying to create elaborate systems or pushing harder. It's the brain is wired in a certain way. And I think that is something that is lost when we talk about executive functioning challenges in the brain and how do we set ourselves up for success. I don't have a great knowledge of this, but there's, rewire the brain. And I'm like, well, I think there's some of that, but I don't know if you're going to be able to rewire the brain completely because the brain is kind of a steadfast organ there. So, but I would love to hear a lot of women that I work with, they hold intense jobs, and parenting is also an intense job or title, however you want to classify it. It's a job and title.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I find they just want to push and push harder to override said system, the brain, where it becomes really fatiguing. And so they'll white knuckle it and push, 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 fatigue, and it puts them into a cycle of paralysis where you might span for a couple weeks or a couple months, and that has that downward negative spiral. I would love to hear your thoughts around that.
Sure. I think that, I also work with a lot of women who kind of are what we might consider, and I don't love this term, but like are high functioning, or, are very maybe qualified and in a perhaps like high power type position, right? And so when we have this experience of kind of having always been on top of everything and a high achiever and always kind of being the person who's kind of kept together, which is a very common experience for individuals with ADHD for a number of reasons. And so when we have that experience, but we're also having these biological shifts that are happening within us, when we continue to kind of fight that over and over and over again, I mean, that's what leads us to burnout, right? It's what leads us to feeling, when we don't understand the way our brain works, it's what leads us to feeling kind of like paralyzed in shame when we can't just get up and fold the 3 loads of laundry that have been sitting on the chair for 3 days, right? So it can oftentimes lead us feeling paralyzed, or when we want to start a new exercise routine or eat in a different way, all those things require so much energy and effort that we just might not have the capacity for, because our capacity may have also decreased as our hormones have shifted. And so if we can acknowledge that there are either some days or weeks or months when we don't have the capacity that maybe we previously did, we're then again able to be more compassionate with ourselves and acknowledge that this is what's happening for me right now, and I don't have the ability to maybe do what I was doing a couple years ago.
I love that. It's the capacity. Energy is finite. I kind of equating it to my clients. I say, we may want to change a lot, but too much change is overwhelming in an already overwhelming schedule. What can we change, or what do we have the capacity for? Even how you took it on and more expanded, like, you know, every year, if we want to look at a 12-month calendar, there's going to be times where your energy is going to be higher, energy is going to be lower, work maybe more demanding in one month, kid schedules may be demanding in a certain month. And if we can plan for this, it doesn't have to be an arduous plan of down to the minute, but just really forecasting like, what is our year going to be like? I know it's something that I do intensely with my training because it helps me. I hate classifying, like everyone's like, oh, you're so type A. And I'm like, I really don't feel like it because I'm very comfortable about leaving a whole sink full of dishes overnight because I'm just done. Like, I mean, I am organized, but I'm also comfortable with messes. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
still type A, but it is one of those where it helps me keep my fitness, which is important to me, not just because I'm a trainer and I'm in the business, but it's part of me. I enjoy it. It is a core value for me, but also it's really important that it's as much as it can be in relationship with my other roles, parenthood, business. And when I'm working with a client, if I can help them expand and look at like, this is part of our life. Yes, we have these upfront goals that need addressing and things that we need to adapt to, but we also can't ignore everything else because you only have so much energy. And we
Yeah.
want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success and not this defeat or burnout. Burnout sucks. I've been there
Yeah.
so many times. Kind of with this is that notion of functioning versus thriving. And I think sometimes that gets a little lost of people just functioning every day versus how are we really thriving. So if you can talk about that, like with ADHD and kind of distinguishing the differences.
Yeah, I think this can be maybe happening for a number of reasons, but when we have the experience of just surviving our day to day, right? And pushing past what our body is telling us, ignoring any signs or symptoms of our body saying, please rest, please feed me, please get more sleep, or let's move our body, right? We become so accustomed to just pushing through. We prioritize everyone else over ourselves. And we end up in that place where we're not actually feeling that great. We just feel like we have to continue in order to keep the kids fed or the house clean or whatever. And it puts us in a place where we're just chronically not being mindful about how we're living our day to day. And so I think the alternative there, and this is something that comes up in a lot of the work that I do with my clients, is how can we, even in these very small doses, how can we be more mindful about how we're navigating our day to day? So whether that looks like, can we notice how we're feeling maybe after we work out or before we work out? Or can we pay more attention to what happens to our ability to navigate our ADHD symptoms on a daily basis when we have more consistent sleep throughout the night? Or how can we be more mindful about what happens for us when we get a little bit of movement, and how does that then impact our ability to be present with our kids or regulate our emotions better when we're with our children, rather than feeling like I just have to do one activity after the next, after the next, after the next. And we don't actually have anything left either for ourselves or for our kids or partner. And so doing some reflecting too of like, what does my schedule actually look like and how can I make it work better for me, rather than doing 25 different activities throughout the week and not having any downtime at home.
I love what you said there. How can I make the schedule work for me? And what does my schedule look like? But like how we just get into that and we get stuck in that, just not feeling good. So it's like a cyclic system that just feeds into each other and kind of spanning out. And perimenopause, one thing I find is is true is our body is so resilient. And I want to start with that. Our body is so resilient, so adaptable. But because of the hormone shifts, the big buzzword out there is cortisol and like, oh, cortisol resistant. I'm like, okay, let's really dig into that. It's our body takes longer to recover. And what I find is if you, especially moms, we stay in this fight or flight where that's our sympathetic nervous system and we don't ever come down off of that so that we get that adequate rest by going into that parasympathetic. So I love what you're saying there's with the work that you do with your clients is getting them to step back and looking at, okay, how are we feeling? Because mindfulness is in I'm going to say the social media sphere is like, let's go meditate for 15 hours before the kids wake up and do your cold plunge. No, mindfulness is seeing, hey, how am I feeling with these interactions? What does my schedule really look like? And when we develop that, we can see what's serving us, what's not serving us, where we need to put more of us to pour more into us, which in return is going to help fuel our nervous system so that, naturally our cortisol is higher in the morning, decreases in the afternoon, so we can get that restfulness so that we are continuing to set ourselves up. And I find it's letting go of that superwoman mode, which we all fall into in some way.
Absolutely. I think whether we're talking about somebody who's navigating potentially a late diagnosis of ADHD during perimenopause or even a late diagnosis prior to going into the perimenopause stage, I think if we can have more of an increased awareness of how our body is responding to whether it's just too much on our plate or, how we treat our body in terms of how much we're sleeping and what we're eating and how we're moving our body, we are better set up for success to navigate, this experience of having this really intensified ADHD symptoms in perimenopause because our body, again, biologically is changing.
Right.
And so we need to be able to notice what's happening to the best of our ability, notice that maybe our energy is different that day, or notice that we slept really poorly the night before because that happens, right? And so how can we then have some sort of like flexible routine for ourselves or flexible schedule for ourselves to make sure that we actually can shift some stuff around if we need to? Or how can we take some of the load off of ourselves, whether it's in your work life, home life, whatever, when we know that we're not going to have the capacity to do what we would kind of normally be doing, and acknowledge that there's going to be shifts. Like there's going to be days or times of day where you feel like you have more energy. How can we capitalize on those periods of time where we do feel energized and that we can, do what we want to do? And then how can we also capitalize on those times where we know we need to rest in order to better function?
I want to pull out a couple key points that I heard there that I think is amazing is flexible. It's we're so flexible with our kids. It's so easy, but we're not flexible with ourselves. And then understanding energy. And like you said, it's really hard. It's very easy to kind of pull a stick through water than it is to pull a stick through that's like your energy. So with my clients, I'm like, if you don't have the energy to work out because you've had a very intense day, but you want to move your body, do mobility. It's not an all or nothing. If you need to go sit on the couch because that's the best thing that serves you, we can always shift a workout. Like you're human and you're not on this earth, like the way in the context with my clients, to solely work out. We can still obtain our goals, but if we work with our body, you're going to get a lot more out of it than you will if you're constantly fighting it. So I always hate this question, but I also love it. So if someone's listening to this, if they're in this point where I kind of think I might be struggling with ADHD, what would be kind of that first step? I don't have the capacity right now to reach out to a provider, kind of that like one thing, that little like takeaway that they could do on their own.
Okay. So if we're talking about not having capacity to reach out to a provider, I would definitely say educate yourself about what ADHD looks like in women. If that's what you feel is happening for you, for whatever reason, whether we saw it on social media or whether we have a family member who's been diagnosed or, we're just kind of getting the sense that might be true for us, or maybe we've kind of always thought that, and now we're especially thinking that could be true, educate yourself about what that looks like. And I can maybe share some good reading materials for sure, but a good kind of quality resource website to go to is Attitude Mag, which we can also link
in the show notes.
That has some really great, solid information about ADHD and hormones. And so it gives some insight into maybe why this might be true for you or if this is true for you. And so I think that educating yourself is definitely a good place to start. If that, is something that continues to resonate, maybe we go to our primary care provider and say, hey, I think this might be true for me. What do you think? And if they say, yeah, let's explore this, great. And they might be a great resource. And if they say, no, that can't be it, that's just perimenopause, you might want to find a new provider. Because there's plenty of providers who are not specialized in that area and don't have the information. And so, might want to find somebody who does.
Yeah. And I think it's very important. You do have the freedom to kind of look around to different providers. And,
Absolutely.
you are the authority on your body. And I have found, and this is just sharing a personal experience, where providers have put some of the symptoms that I've been having in the way of like, whether they be, I'm going to say mental or physical, as to, oh, you're a mom and you're in the thick of life. You get a second opinion, a third opinion. And to that point with providers, is there a specific place to find if one is trained in understanding ADHD? Is there a location to find that or no?
I mean, I don't have a good answer for that one.
That's totally fine. Is there something to look for? So let's say, obviously we know you're trained in ADHD, but if someone were to go to a site, if they're not local to you, which you're in southeastern Pennsylvania, is there keywords or is there a certification to look for?
Well, it's hard to say. There are definitely certifications for individuals who, are specialized in ADHD. I think that finding someone who does say that they are specialized in ADHD is key because they are going to be more likely to be able to support you. There are, like I said, there are some certifications, but there are also plenty of providers who are not certified, who have lots of really great experience and have lots of lived experience. And so, I mean, truly, I do find, and this is not just because I experience this as well, I'm a provider who has ADHD and also works with women with ADHD, but I do find that individuals with ADHD are usually better able to help those who want to explore ADHD because they just have a better understanding of what it is like to live with ADHD. And so I think that can be really helpful to have someone who also has some lived experience. I think that it's also really supportive to have a provider if you're, seeking to better understand whether or not you have ADHD. You can ask up front if you're getting started with someone, are you willing to explore ADHD with me? And if they say no, because I just learned about it on social media and everyone thinks they have ADHD, that's a big red flag to go elsewhere.
Yeah, that's very helpful because there's a lot out there. And like to your point, there's a lot of people that claim things. I hear it in my industry that they are knowledgeable in that. I have had clients that are like, I worked with XYZ person. They said they were, but they had no idea, which can be very annoying as someone who is like yourself, you're upfront, you're forward, you have the backing. So yeah, I advocate for yourself and stick with that. And I do like how you added, because it does make a difference if someone has lived experience and understanding ADHD. Also, I always joke like the Psych 101 joke is you go into Psych 101 feeling like you're totally grounded. You go out diagnosing yourself with 8 million different things because you think you have it all.
Right.
So it's not invalidating if you read something on social media. That's great, but no, it's supposed to hook you in, get the like, do the research, and we will include places where you can educate yourself to learn a little bit more. Always work with a licensed accredited provider in this area. I think it does help, but also arming yourself and educating yourself through accredited books is going to help as well. This has been awesome. We're going to wrap it up. I know I'll have you back on, but we will have all of your links and resources in the show notes. also a link to the previous episode that you were on. I think it was almost a year ago, which
I
is
think so too. It was a while ago.
But is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I mean, I think the biggest point is if you feel like this might be happening for you, believe yourself. Go seek a provider who is willing to explore that with you. And there is support out there, and it can be really, really impactful to understand how your brain works if you have ADHD. And so go seek it out. It's never too late to seek out a diagnosis.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. This was
Thanks
amazing.
for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in to Miles from Review, powered by KatFit Strength. If this podcast inspires you, don't keep it for yourself. Hit follow or subscribe to stay updated on the new episodes, and leave us a review to help more women and moms discover this space. Your feedback fuels this podcast, and I'd love to hear what's working for you or what topics you want to dive into next. You can connect with me on Instagram at KatFit Strength, or share this episode with a friend who is ready to embrace her strength. Remember, fitness isn't about perfection. It's about showing up for yourself and finding strength in every step of your journey. Until next time, keep moving forward, 1 mile at a time.